For 8-3, if we look at number 1, we're looking at what do I multiply 1.5 by to get 12, which is the same thing as saying I'm going to divide 12 by 1.5. And we know we have to move our decimal point over, and in this case we add a 0, and then we put our x's here. And if we think, I'm going to go all the way up to 9 just to see. I have 45. Oops, that's going to be too high because that's going to be 135. So I'm going to change my 9 to an 8. 8 times 5 is 40. Oh, right on the money. So P equals 8. In the case of number 2, if I'm looking at what do I add to 18 to get to 150, that's the same thing as saying 150 minus 18 equals y. And this is just a simple subtraction problem. So I have y equals 132. For number 3, I wrote a simplified problem over here to help understand what you're going to do. They're set up exactly the same. I guess I could put a D here. If I look here, 12 divided by D equals 4, immediately you know the answer is 3. But if you think about how you got there, you said 4 times D equals 12, and then D equals 3. So in this case, you're saying, we're going to set it up the same way, 3 times D equals 81. And this over here, if I hadn't written this so messy, is the same thing as saying 12 divided by 4. So this is going to be 81 divided by 3. And I have 27, so D equals 27. Once again, it's easiest if you can't see what you're supposed to do to make a simpler problem. So if I think 7 minus K equals 2, I just took off the ones place, you can see. Of course, all of you know that K equals 5. But when you think about how you got 5, that's the same thing as saying 7 minus 2. So you took this 7 and subtracted this 2. So I'm going to do the same thing here and say 76 minus 29, and I'm going to get my answer. Again, I'm going to make a simpler problem. I'm going to say something like 1 plus A equals 3. Of course, once again, we know A equals 2. We got that 2 by subtracting these two numbers. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to take the 2.5 and we're going to subtract 3/4. We have to find a common denominator, which in this case is 4. We multiplied this by 2, so we have to multiply the numerator by 2. And we're subtracting, and we can't subtract 2 minus 3. So we're going to borrow a whole, which changes this to a 6. 6 minus 3 is 3. Our denominator stays the same. Don't forget the whole number. And our answer is 1 1/3. I should say A equals 1 3/4. I said that wrong the first time. When you ask what do you multiply 16 by to get 224, again, if I say 2n equals 6, we know that n equals 3. The way I got 3 was to divide these two numbers. So that helps me figure out that I need to divide these two numbers. 16 doesn't go into 2, but it goes into 22 one time. I subtract and I get 64. We're going to go ahead and try, let's try 4. 4 times 6 is 24. And that gets us 14. So we have n equals 14. Now you remember here with our two-step process, it says you're going to need 2 steps. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this 6 from both sides. Whatever I do to one side of the equation, I need to do to the other side of the equation. So I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. And that gets me 8 equals 2w. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 2. That cancels out. And 8 divided by 2 is 4, so w equals 4. Now this is a tricky one, but the way to think about this is to think 35 divided by what equals 7. And you know 35 divided by 5 equals 7. So this here, and I'm going to make it a circle now, needs to equal 5. So c plus 2 has to equal 5. I'm going to subtract 2 from each side, which means that c is going to equal 3. I skipped 9 because I wanted you to try that one on your own, but if we look at 10, what we're going to do is, once again, we need to get the variable by itself, so we're going to add 3 to both sides. because negative 3 plus 3 gets rid of the 3's. So now I have r divided by 4 equals 10. Now, common mistake kids do, they can't figure out how to get that r. When you don't know the first number, you're going to take these two numbers and multiply them. So we get r equals 40. Just to test our answer, see if this works. 40 divided by 4 is 10, and we know that works, so that answer is correct. Number 11 is kind of a goofy one. We can do this a couple of different ways. We can get rid of the 22 on both sides, but then we need to remember how to subtract negative numbers, which some of us don't. When we subtract 22 from 7, we get negative 15, and then we have negative 3m. The negatives cancel each other out. So now we have 3m equals 15. In other words, what do we multiply by 3 to get to 15? Which I should show you the right way to do this. Which means I'm dividing both sides by 3, and that gets me 5 equals m. And if we go and plug that in up at the top, in other words, we take this m, the first m, out, and we think of it as a 5 instead. Think, does this make sense? 22 minus 15 equals 7, correct? If that's too hard, if you can't figure out how to deal with the negative numbers, the other thing that you can, and it hopefully is a little bit less confusing, is if we do the exact same problem, you're going to get rid of the things on each side. And I'll show you what I mean. I don't know how to deal with this negative number, so I'm going to add 3m to this side, which means I need to add 3m to this side. So now I have 7 plus 3m equals 22. I need to get rid of that 7 from both sides. So this gets rid of this. And now I have 3m equals 15 and m equals 5. So that's just a different way of looking at it. For number 12, I need to get rid of the 3. And the only way to get rid of this 3, because it's not part of a plus or minus equation, is to divide both sides by 3. When I divide this side by 3, it gets rid of that 3. When I divide that side by 3, 150 divided by 3 should be mental math. You should get 50. Now you're left with an equation, t plus 36. So we need to get rid of 36 from each side, and I'll let you do the math on that. So if we go way back to the beginning of the year with the situation and solution equations, we have Diana wants to play the tuba and marching band. Her goal is to practice 5 hours each week. It is Thursday, and she has practiced for 3.5 hours. How much longer must she practice to meet her weekly goal? So we have that she has already, I'm going to do the situation equation first here. She has done 3.5 hours. She needs to do some more, I should maybe say more hours, to get us to 5. And then the solution equation is she has to be at 5. She's already done 3.5, which leaves her with how many more hours? And then it asks you to also solve this. So I'm going to take 5 minus 3.5. I'm going to borrow a whole, and that's going to make 2 halves because I want my denominators to be the same. I subtract, and I get 1.5 hours. And I want to make sure that makes sense, that she has 3.5 hours, add another hour, and then another half an hour, and that gets us to 5. For the top of the remembering section, we have to do some conversions. For number 1, we know that there are 24 hours in a day, and there are a total of 13 days. So we have to multiply the two numbers, and we're going to get a total of 312 hours. We have that additional 2 hours, so we're going to have a total of 314 hours. Then going to minutes, we know that there are 60 minutes in an hour. So we're going to multiply those, and then we have to add on the additional 12 minutes, and that will give us a total of 552 minutes. And it's going to be the same thing for numbers 3 and 4. For 5 through 10, it tells us that we're going to try to figure out if we need to multiply or divide, and then we have to solve it. I'm going to help you figure out whether to multiply or divide, and you're going to solve it on your own. The football team needs new shoulder pads for the players. There are 64 players on the team, and each set costs $132.79. How much will the team spend on shoulder pads? We are going to multiply because each of the 64 players needs to spend that. So 132 plus 132, 64 times. So you're going to multiply those two numbers together. Number 6 says, against their rival school, the football team gained a total of 781.75 yards on 53 plays. What was the average gain per play for each play? So if we know the total and we're trying to figure out what each one is, we know we're going to divide. So we're going to divide 781.75 divided by 53. Number 7, we are going to cross off because we haven't learned how to convert yet. And we're also going to cross off number 8. To go to a game at another school, the entire team, 12 coaches, 8 cheerleaders, and 50 members of the band traveled by bus. Each bus held 45 people. How many buses were needed? Well, the first thing we need to do is to add 12 and 8 is 20 plus 50. There's 70 people in all going. So instead of dividing this, I'm just going to do repeated subtraction. So there's one bus and there's still 25 people left. Even though the second bus is only going to have 25 people, I need to have 2 buses. And on this one I divided. And then on number 10 it says, over the last 22 seasons, the team scored a total of 6,028 points. What was the average number of points scored in a season? This is just like number 6, where you have the total and you're looking at the average of each season. So we're going to take 6,028 and divide it by 22.